Boker Tov. We're going to get started in just a moment as we continue our study with our scholar in residence, Scott Fried. And so I invite you to take a seat in the horseshoe here. We have those who are joining us digitally as well. We welcome you this morning. So I wanted to, for those of you who did not have the chance last night, to participate in our worship and in Scott's presentation, you missed out. But you have a chance this morning to engage, and again tomorrow morning as well with Scott, who is one of those rare individuals who is not only able to write extremely well, and he's a prolific author. He's written 4 books. His most recent book, How to Raise an Elegant Teen, The ABCs of Gen Z Parenting, will be available tomorrow for those who are interested. This is a shameless plug number 1. Although if I'm plugging it, I don't know if it counts as a shameless plug.
No, Shane.
No, if you said it, then okay, got it.
You're my agent.
So not only is he able to write beautifully, but he is an amazing and very compelling speaker, as you'll find out again this morning for those who weren't here last night. It's a rare combination. Scott possesses a tremendous passion for what he does, for making sure that we take note of one another, to make sure especially that we take note of the teens in our midst and are able to help them navigate the challenges of life and to help them continue to grow and thrive in their becoming adults in our community. So this morning, the focus will be on how we derive these messages a little bit from Torah, and not to take up any more of Scott's time, except to say we are so grateful that you're here with us this morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for being here this morning if you're new to me. I want to start with a prayer. Another prayer, not the one we did last night, but another one of my favorites. I like to collect prayers. It's a nice pastime. And all I need you to do is say amen. Say amen. It goes like this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa li nes v'nisim b'makom hazeh. Together we say amen. Praised are you, our eternal, the creator of all things, who grants me miracles, nes v'nisim b'makom hazeh, in this place. I am grateful for the miracles in the room, into every room in which I walk. I am grateful for you, and I am so grateful for the miracles you bring me, the miracles that you are. So today, good morning, I want to sort of continue, from where we left off last night. I want to talk about how it is that we can learn from a time in the world where many of us lived through the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and what the pandemic at the time in the late 80s and early 90s could teach us how to survive through this new pandemic, COVID. There are a lot of parallels, and if you remember, some of you who were at the dinner last night, I shared this little piece of a poem from Yehuda Amichai. Yehuda Amichai is a poet from Israel who died about 16 or 17 years ago. And in one of his poems, he talks about a tree that he passes. And the tree is sick and bare and dying, but one of his friends named Tzvi notices that the tree who's dying is giving off beautiful fruit. And the idea being that as we are dying, our greatest gifts come forth. So much of what I know and much of what I teach comes from the wisdom and the lessons learned and the fruit that was yielded by the friends of mine who died of AIDS as they left this earth in the early 90s. In my lifetime, I'm 58 now. I've lost 135 friends to AIDS, and most of those died in the beginning of the 90s. Most of them in the year between 1991 and 93. That was the height of the epidemic in New York City, where I'm from. And these young men and some women, some Jewish, some not, some IV drug users, 1 or 2 hemophiliacs, some lesbians, mostly gay men, taught me about life as they were leaving their lives. And I wanted to put together a little talk with you today that can teach you what they taught me and see if we can find ways to apply it, these messages, these lessons, to what we're living through now in a time of COVID and hopefully soon post-COVID. And I want to add one little piece, and then I'm going to ask you to invite you to, I will tell you now, I invite you as I teach to ask me questions or to offer some ideas. It's not essentially a chavruta, but it's an opportunity for us to discuss. But before we get there, I just want to say this one important piece that I've been playing with. And when I was a college student in NYU, I studied a lot of Greek theater and Greek literature. And I learned that in the ancient Greek wars, there was a soldier who you couldn't kill. And that soldier, you couldn't sling an arrow in his direction. And that soldier was known as a rhapsodist or a rhapsodist. Because that soldier would then go back to the villages and the towns where he was from, and he would sing a tale of the war that he just saw and tell the locals of how their loved ones died. Effectively, the rhapsodist was the Anderson Cooper of the time. The CNN or the whatever news channel you watch, he was the one who told the journalist. But I love the notion that even in uncivilized times, they knew you couldn't kill that one because they wanted their story to be told. We want to be immortalized. I'm living with HIV for 34 years. I'm one of the few that didn't die in my support group. Sometimes I like to think of myself as the rhapsodist, the one who needs to tell the story. Someone had to stay behind. But as a result, there's a tremendous responsibility that I feel I bear, I carry into every room that I walk. I bring with me the stories of those who can't speak their story. And I feel a responsibility to do so. And so today, I want to share a lot of their wisdom and do it in a way that maybe it applies to your lives, or hopefully it applies to your lives, and specifically today, living with COVID in our times. And the first is the slide that you see here. It's a quote from a woman that was one of my HIV group support facilitators. We had a few. But this one woman was the very first person whom I ever met in a support group. And ironically, she just ran for president. It's maybe you know Marianne Williamson. She was the one of the 17 people on the stage the day that the two debates that the Democrats had their debates 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. And she was the one on the very left-hand side of the stage that made a lot of noise and was the most Googled and was kind of wacky and kooky and whatever else and beloved by some and misunderstood by many, but she made some salient points. Marianne Williamson was the first person to open up a support group for people living with HIV in New York City and in Los Angeles back in 1989, 1990. And she called it the Manhattan Center for Living, the LA Center for Living, because the focus is on living. But she said this quote. She said, "We're never promised tomorrow. In the time of the great mystery, which is every day is the great mystery, the one thing that is certain is that love prevails." So in my support group, from which the musical Rent is based, if you're a Rent head, if you know about the musical Rent, there's a big song in there that goes, "No day but today." That's what that means. That's the genesis of no day but today. We would say, we're not promised tomorrow. And when you're diagnosed with a life-challenging illness, and we don't say life-threatening anymore, we say life-challenging because that's what life is. It presents challenges. When you're in the face of something that challenges your existence, you recognize that time is fleeting. I remember in 9/11 in New York City, and actually I should say 9/12, the day after 9/11, people were walking around saying, how could this happen? How could this happen? You go to work and you don't come back. And I went to my therapist and said, so now they get it. Now they get it. Because when I got infected at 24 years of age, the next day I recognized that this is all we get. And so we're not promised tomorrow. Nobody is. It's only when something happens and wakes you up and makes you recognize it that you realize you've got today. What are you going to do with it? And according to our support group and Marianne Williamson and her followers, love is the one thing that we can count on. Love is the one thing that is certain. But what do you do when the terrible blow arrives? What do you do when I like to say it poetically, the faithful ache descends or wakes up? That which in us is going to happen, whatever it is, the ache that is faithful, that reminds us that we are mortal and that we only have today, and awakens us to the certainty of only one thing, love. What do you do when you don't know what to do? Oh, I've got the pointer, I've got the clicker. Where do I face it? That way? Oh, it works. Okay. What do you do when you don't know what to do? You stay in the I don't know. So there are 10 points I want to make. And I don't know that we're going to get to all 10 based on how much we talk to each other and discuss. But I want to start with this one. Of the 10 commandments of how to survive a pandemic, from AIDS to COVID, lessons for a new generation, another generation. The first thing we do is hang out in the I don't know. Last night, if you were here, you heard me say 3 times, with the sun on my back, I stand before an uncertain future. That is the idea that the future is uncertain, that we're living in a great mystery. That's where the I don't know comes in. When you don't know what to do, the first thing you do is you surrender to the I don't know. And this is true about COVID, this is true about anything else in our lives in this very moment. When you don't know what to do, surrender to the I don't know, and I'll give you an example. I was giving a talk many summers ago at the very beginning of my career, so this is maybe 1992, at a camp in the Northeast, Camp Ramah, one of the many. In Northeast, it was Palmer, and it was Shabbos, and Rabbi Wolf, I believe it was, and I were sitting in a giant room, and the rest of the kids were outside playing ultimate frisbee in the rain. Some of the kids campers who didn't want to get wet, didn't want to play ultimate frisbee, came into the room to learn. So we had a little thing called the God Seminary. And Rabbi Wolf and I said, we're going to talk about God today, how God shows up in your life, and how does God exist at all? And all is welcome, but in order for us to invite God or talk about God today, we need to invite God in. So who's going to give us a prayer? And we were sitting in a circle just like we're sitting in a circle right here. And you know what just occurred to me? I don't have to be behind the screen. I could be here because, oh, it feels so much better. Here you are. All right, let me take a moment. Isn't it? Oh, Robbie's going to do that for the Zoom. Sorry for the people out there watching me. They'll... And are you okay with me standing here without a mask? Are you comfortable? Okay. Thank you. So we're sitting in a circle at Camp Ramon Palmer on a Saturday morning, hiding from the rain. And the rabbi said, who's gonna give us a prayer? And he looked at the first person in the circle, who looked at the next person, who looked at the person next to her, and so on and so forth. And we went around the circle and nobody spoke. So the rabbi went the other direction. Who will give us a prayer? And they went back the other way. And finally, the rabbi said to this young woman who was hiding from the rest of us, sitting outside the circle on a couch in the back of the giant room. He said there, you there, you hiding from us in the back of the room, sitting on the couch, you will give us a prayer. And she looked up at us, looking at her, and she looked down at her shoelaces, and she started to fidget with them. And then she looked up at us again, and she said, Rabbi, actually, I just came here to not get wet. I don't know any prayers. The rabbi said, so here's the thing about God. If all we do for the next hour is get your prayer, it will be enough. As we say in Hebrew, maspeak v'dai. It's enough, and more than enough, because you will have invited God into our lives. So, please, tell us your prayer. So now she's on the hot seat. So she looked down at her shoelaces and looked up at us, looking at her, and she seemed parched, and she spoke, and she said, Rabbi, I don't know. I just don't know. The rabbi said, perfect. I don't know. Well, isn't that the perfect prayer? To invite God into our lives. What do you do when you don't know what to do? The first thing you do is surrender to the notion that you don't know. In that way, we can invite God into our lives. I've always believed that God needs to be invited in, right? I believe that God needs to be invited in to our lives. And one of the ways we do that is by saying, Baruch atah Adoshem Elokeinu melech haolam, praised are you. But another way to do that is to simply say, I surrender. I don't know how to make sense of this thing we call life in the midst of a pandemic or on a Saturday morning or whatever is in between. So I will surrender, and in so doing, maybe God can come in. And it's really the first step in the 12 steps in AA and in NA and in Al-Anon and in the program, right? The first thing is I admit that I am powerless over my addiction or whatever it is that I've come to these rooms to work on. I surrender. I give up. So that, next step, I can hand it over to a power greater than me. The first thing we do when we don't know what to do in a time when life doesn't make sense is hang out in the I don't know. And as a community, why don't we hang out in the I don't know together? What would it be like if we examined what it is and what the power is in surrendering and not knowing? So another example, a friend of mine is married to a woman from Afghanistan. And her family is still or just left Afghanistan. And he said to me the other night, I'm a musician, I write songs, that's what I do for a living, but my wife's mother and father and family are now in a refugee camp in North Macedonia, which is a new country. They just renamed it 2 years ago. North Macedonia, and they're not sure they're going to not just get out, or they're not sure they're going to survive. How, he said, how am I supposed to write music? How am I supposed to, what am I supposed to do with my life? Well, theirs is so different. The great I don't know. And I said to him, in the moments that you surrender to what you don't know, you find your greatest strength, your purpose. And sometimes purpose is a little overrated. We think purpose has to be saving the world, tikkun olam. Sometimes purpose is something as simple as getting out of bed so that we can surrender to the day ahead and invite God to do the rest. I said to Ross, one day you're going to walk into a room and someone's going to turn their head in your direction, and they're not going to know why they feel safe with you, but they just will feel safe with you because you spent time in the I don't know, the great don't know. So there's power in surrendering. There's power in taking in this moment of what now? Where do we go from here? What is the new normal? Not so sure that the old normal was so good anyway. Where do we head from here? So the first thing we do when hope is not in sight is hang out with what we don't know. But then you got to ask yourselves, what do you know? Number 2 on these 10 commandments of what to do in a time of pandemic. What is it that you do know? Is it that one? Yeah, there it is. Stay in the moment. Stick to the facts. Rely on evidence-based information. What does that mean? In my Wednesday night support group, the facilitator would say, after a person would raise their hand and say, I have AIDS and I'm scared of my T cells and I don't know what to do, the stuff we deal with of life, the facilitator would say, so, what color is your shirt? What row are you sitting in, or what chair are you sitting in? And tell me, how do your feet feel in your socks? Stay here in the moment. Number 1, surrender to the I don't know. And then when you don't know, great, but what do you know? Rely on evidence-based information. Stick to the facts. Stay in the moment. This will save your life. This will keep you present. This will help you. Why? Because when we're nervous in the great don't know and wonder about the future becomes a dangerous neighborhood. In other words, it's simply anxiety. The only place to feel peace is in the present moment. The only place that God can reach us is in the present moment. God's not going back in time, and God's not going to get us in the future. If we want to invite God in so we can be present for the miracle, God's presence, it's got to be here, right now, in this moment. So what color is your shirt? I'm seriously asking you. You don't have to say it, but just consider, think, what color did you put on today? And what chair are you sitting in? 5, 6, 7? Are you in the 8th? Are you what does it feel like in your shoes? What does it feel like to be you? What's the air around you like? What'd you have for breakfast? Who's sitting next to you? What day is it? And the reason staying in the moment is so important, well, there are many. I'll give you 2. Number 1 is it gets you out of that dangerous neighborhood called the future. The imagined future, which creates, and as we say on the slide, anticipatory grief. It's the feeling you get about the uncertain future. It robs you of your sense of safety and agency, and it causes anxiety. Don't go there, right? It's a dangerous neighborhood. So the one reason we stay in the present is so it gets us out of there. But the main reason of the many is because this, in this moment, is everything. There's nothing else we need. I got the rabbi on my left. I got Ilan over here. I got my cousin sitting out over there. I got some food in my belly. I got my dog sleeping at home. I got you all with hearts that are open and ripe and ready to learn. Really. In this moment, is there anything else we need in this moment? not talking about tonight and tomorrow. I know we need more. But in this moment, is there anything else we need? And if we lived a lifetime of just moments like these, it would be enough. It would be enough. So when you don't know what to do, the first thing you do is surrender to the don't know so that God can be present. And then for God to actually access us, we do number 2, which is ask ourselves what we do know. To be present here in this moment so that God can be with us. Another way to explain it, go upstairs. I lost it. Can you help me out, Rabbi Heaps? Can you go up one? Yeah, there it is. We're good. Thank you. So Stephen Levine. Stephen Levine, you might remember him years ago. He was the foremost author on death and dying, along with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And Stephen Levine died 2 or 3 years ago. But interesting connection between me and Stephen Levine. When I went to get my HIV test in 1987, I gave a fake name because I didn't want to. I thought my results, maybe they'll come back positive. I don't know, but if they do, I don't want the name Scott Fried attached to the letters HIV or AIDS. Today, by the way, if you were to Google HIV, AIDS, and Jew, the only thing that comes up is the name Scott Fried. That's it. Which is funny, but also it's a little tragic. It's a little tragic because there's just nobody else in the Jewish community talking about AIDS. That's what it tells me. There's just nobody else in Judaism talking about AIDS and Jews. Why is it only me? But that's another sermon for another time. But I didn't want my name attached to HIV back then, so I gave a fake name. I was subletting a dentist, a friend of my family's members, and he was a dentist, and his name was Stephen. So I'll give my name; it'll be Stephen. And Steve Levy was his name, Steve Levy. So I remember thinking, I will call myself Stephen Levine, and if I get a letter from the health department, it goes to Stephen Levine, it won't be me, and they'll think it's the Levys and it's a mistake. It was a good idea, so I gave the name Stephen Levine. And after I got my results 6 months later, I had to wait 6 months, so I got the results a few weeks later. By the way, interesting point. Today, if you were to get tested for HIV, you can get your results in less than 18 minutes. Back in 1987, you had to wait 3 weeks to get the results. So I got the results. And I didn't know what to do, so I went to a bookstore. This is before the internet. I went to a bookstore, went to Barnes & Noble, and I went to the self-help section. And I looked for a book that might help me. And I saw on the spine the name Stephen Levine, pronounced Levine. And the book was called Who Dies? And I read it, I bought it, read every word, and read a bunch of his other books. And he taught me about life. And then I went to see him give his lectures when he was in New York. And in one particular workshop he'd given, it was a workshop for everybody in the room was living with a life-challenging illness, whether it was cancer or whether it was a lot of people with AIDS or something else. By the way, we've all got a life-challenging illness. It's called life, right? But this room was full of people with disease and illness, and they knew that they were just looking at life in a different way. And he said, I'm gonna give you the secret to life. And he was sitting on a stage, and he said, I apologize that I'm on a stage, and all of you, there were hundreds of us, are sitting out there on chairs because it looks to you that I'm higher than you, therefore I'm wiser. And I'm not. I'm equal to you. I just want you to know that what I have to say to you is important, and I'd like you to see me. That's why I'm on the stage. But I'm not any smarter or wiser or closer to God. Instead, he said, so I'm going to... Thank you, Rabbi. So he said, I want to give you the secret to life. So we all sat on the edge of our chairs because this is a room full of people who were living with a life-challenging illness, and they wanted to know the secret to life. Is it me? Is it my? Is it something? Mine?
I have no idea what
It's all right. We'll work with it. Let's work with it. When I so Stephen Levine, what do you think? Turn this off or okay.
There you go.
Thanks. All right. All right. Stephen Levine said to all of us, "You want to know the secret to life?" We all did. Sitting on the edge of our seats, mostly me. He said, "It's simple, but it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. Pay attention. That's it. That's all you got to do. That's the secret to life. Because everything you need is right in front of you. In other words, another way of describing it, when I was in high school, I took a class on film with Mr. Duffy, and I don't remember anything he taught me except this one thing. He said, when you watch a movie, I want you to look at everything in the screen, everything that the cinematographer, the director set up for you to see in the shot. Not just the protagonist, not just the actor or the actress, in the center of the screen. I want you to see the top left corner and the bottom right corner. I want you to see everything. Take it all in. Pay attention to everything that the universe, that the director, that the cinematographer, that God is putting in front of you. That's the ingredients to work with. That's how you stay in the moment. In the musical Rent, it's no day but today. There's only us, there's only this, forget regret, or life is yours to miss. No other path, no other way, no day but today. Number 1, surrender to the I don't know. Number 2, stay in the moment. Number 3, accept things as they are. Now this is a tough one, to accept things as they are, because sometimes things are not easy to accept. But we were taught to accept things as they are as children in a nursery rhyme that everybody I know was taught. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. We were all taught that in first grade or in kindergarten. Merrily, 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 merrily. 4 merrilies. Life is but a dream. It's all about acceptance. Go with the flow, ride the direction, ride with the current, bloom where you're planted, all those expressions. Accept things as they are. Acceptance, my friend Robert Levine used to say, who died of pancreatic cancer after surviving HIV/AIDS for 3 decades, he used to say, acceptance is such a beautiful word. What would it be if we could just live in the now this? It's a very Buddhist consideration. Now this. So anytime somebody would come to the support group and raise their hand and tell their story of what's going on with them, the facilitator would have one of 3 responses. She would say, now this. Or she would say, well, here we are. Or she would say, all this is just a part of all there is. There's something glorious about it when you do it enough. If you do it enough, you start to recognize, here we are, this is it. This is as it needs to be. And here we are. There's no alone in this. It's the togetherness of this. The acceptance of things as they are makes it easier. And then 4, Marianne Williamson said this: I can't add days to your life, but I can add life to your days. That's not correctly the typo there. But what she said was, I can't add days to your life. But what I can do, I can add life to your days. You want to know how to do that? And so we said, sure, what's that? She said, simple, really. It's going to be a lot of work. Make yourself useful. Serve. Do something for somebody else who's got it worse than you, but the person who's got it worse than you that you're doing it for, can't know that they've got it worse than you. They've got to think they've got the best life ever. Because you can't feel that you're superior to them in your serving of them. Find people who've got it worse than you, but they're happier than you because of it. And then you will understand your situation in relation to theirs. And so if you heard my bio last night, you heard the rabbi say, and one of the things that I used to do before pandemic was go to Honduras and build houses and roads and infrastructure with my cousin Jill. What we learned there is that the people who have no shoes, no money, a hole in the roof over their head where it rains on the mattress where they sleep, will give you the one plate they have to eat on and all the food they've got because they're happy and they want to serve. Helping people who don't know they've got it worse than you will remind you how much you got. It puts you in a proper, as we say in the rooms, as they say in the rooms, right size. Right size. Number 5, stay curious. Stay curious. Curiosity provides lighting in life. Curiosity is the lighting designer of life. It helps you see it in a different way. It gives you perspective. So when things don't make sense, just be curious. It's part of the acceptance piece. The what now? Let's just find out. Let's wait and see. What's ahead? I'm not sure, but I'm curious as opposed to frightened or anxious. I'm interested. I want to know. It keeps us young. Number 6, I said this last night, stay away from adjectives. It's neither good nor bad. It is what it is. Is there any good news here? Is there any bad news here? We assign the situation an adjective. It's good, it's bad, but it is what it is. When you're not living the life you thought you'd be living, ask yourself this question: what are you going to do about it? Every week I would raise my hand and I would complain. Back in the early days, I was the one who complained the most. I would say, I got infected with HIV because I had sex, but it was my only time. It's not fair. Woe was me. And the facilitator would always say, got it. So, what are you going to do about it? It's up to us. It's what we assign to it, our relationship to it. And some of you heard me last night. I shared the story about, and Randy, are you here? Yes, and we talked about it at dinner. I shared the story about how one man said, I have to tell my parents that I'm dying of AIDS and I'm scared and I don't know. And the facilitator said, but I'm not hearing the problem. And he repeated it, and she said, I'm still not hearing the problem. And Randy asked me at dinner, but telling your kids, your kids telling the parents that they have AIDS and they're going to die at the height of the epidemic, that's a problem. And so I want to finish off that part of that story. The facilitator would, after she would say, I don't hear the problem, would say, the quality of life does not depend on your circumstances, but what you do with them. Circumstances are neutral. They just are. How you relate to them is what you do with your life. So the question you got to ask yourself is, what am I going to do about this? It would be really wise once in a while to stay away from adjectives and live in just the data. Just the data. So I have this men's group I go to on Monday nights, and we have this exercise where we do when somebody's really angry or somebody's really agitated and they just need to get it out. We break it up. I'll ask them to stand and say, just give me the facts. Don't tell me how you feel about the situation. Not now. Don't tell me your judgments about the situation. Just the data. What happened? Well, what happened was this person said they would do this thing and they didn't. And it made me feel, no, not feelings, just the data. Okay, they did this thing and they didn't. And then I got angry. Great, data. No adjectives. Now we can work with the data. So, how do you feel about it? What do you judge about it? What are your projections? How does it remind you of your childhood? But we can't unpack it until we can actually see it for what it really is. But if you blend all the data in with feelings and projections and judgments and contradictions and desires and memories and earlier wounds, the data gets muddy, gets confusing. So stick to the facts and stay away from adjectives. And this one's really important. We've got to find the come here people. You got to find the Khmer people. Once upon a time, when I was a little boy, the world was full of Khmer people. They were the ones who literally said, "Come here," right? It's simple. The ones who say, "Come here." I saved a seat, sit next to me. When I grew up in Brooklyn, or in Long Island, in Brooklyn on the weekends, my grandparents lived in a building in Brooklyn on Avenue J, and on the top left-hand third floor. And then across the hall was the great uncle, and downstairs was the cousin, and over there was the great aunt. And the whole Freed family lived in this building. I would go from apartment to apartment, and I'd get a Goldenberg peanut chew from one, and I'd get some cookies, sugar cookies from the other, and of course the babka from my great aunt Mindel. I would just go from apartment to apartment, right? The Khmer people were everywhere. Today, we have FaceTime, and we've got Zoom, so the Khmer people are far from us. We need to bring them back physically into our world. A Khmer person doesn't judge. A Khmer person doesn't scold, doesn't grade, doesn't solve. A Khmer person doesn't fix because they know you're not broken. When you don't know what to do and hope is not in sight, you're living in the time of the great mystery, you're trying to stay in the present and be curious about it and accept it, the next thing you do is you find the people who receive you and allow you to be exactly who you are. So my great aunt Mindel would say, as you see on the screen, "Scotty," as she would sit there at the kitchen in Brooklyn and Flatbush and give me her cookies and babka. "Tochas oifen tish, Scotty, tochas oifen tish." And I suspect most of you in this, it's rare that I'm in a room with people that know Tochas oifen tish. But you know, right? Tochas oifen tish means, who can tell me what it means? What's that? Yeah, but literally, yes, tell me the facts. But what does it mean literally in Yiddish? Tochas oifen tish. Yes, your tochas, put it on the table. Right, which means give me the facts. Which means take your secrets out of your pockets, lay your cards down. But the actual words are everything. If you could put your tush on the table, you got nothing left to lose, right? Give it all to me. Bear it all. I want it all. And then she would say, it's in my pocket. And then she would say, "Rabbi, where's Rabbi Heaps? Would you do me a favor? Would you just, could you just give me the next slide? I'm going to ask you to give me the next slide." And then she would say, put your tush on the table, "Ich soll lieb huben mehr," so that I can love you more. That's what a Khmer person does. They're so rare. They're just so rare. And you know why they're rare? Because today we have a world filled of people who understandably, I don't blame anybody for this, filled with fear. And because we have so much fear of that which is uncertain, we feel that we have the right to judge and interrupt and comment on Facebook anytime we want, any time of day or night, rather than simply just be and receive. Tochas oifen tish, ich soll dir lieb huben mehr means, show me who you are so that I can love you more. There's not a thing you could say or do that would take my love away from you. Those are the Khmer people. They make the world a better place. And mostly they're the grandparents, right? The Zadis and the Bubbies and the Saptas and the Sabbas. Mostly. And once in a while you'll have a cousin who's a Khmer person or a rabbi who's a Khmer person. But they're rare. They're so rare. So when my nephew was born, he's 35 now, but my sister gave me this blanket that he was wrapped in, and she said, "Here, you can have this. It's called a receiving blanket." I said, receiving blanket, what a nice term. And she said, yeah, and then they put them on a receiving table to weigh them. So I did a little research on a receiving blanket. It's like a 3x5 piece of muslin. You know, it's pink and blue, and it's striped, and that's called a receiving blanket. Once upon a time, there was a life just born, and it was wrapped in kindness. And then that baby went off to be a child, and it filled its pockets with pennies and promises, which is the fortune of a childhood. A penny and a promise, it's a fortune of life. And then that child became a teenager, and then a young adult, and an adult. And somewhere along the line, the world stopped wrapping its arms around that person. The receiving blanket gets put literally on the top shelf of a closet, or is given away to somebody. We need to bring back the Khmer people. We need to take the receiving blankets off the top shelf of our closets. We need to wrap each other in cloaks of kindness. We need to, this is my favorite word in the English language, we need to receive. We need to be more receiving people. People who receive, who allow others permission to be exactly who they are. And here's the key to healing somebody. Permission to be exactly who you are, even if who you are isn't who you want to be. That's what heals people. When we give somebody permission to be exactly who they are, especially in the moments when who they are at that moment or that year or that day isn't who they want to be, they begin the process of healing, integrating all of it into wholeness, healing. Now, when I've said that in a room full of trans-questioning teens who believe they're in the wrong body, that sentence takes on a whole new dimension. Right? The Khmer people give us permission to be exactly who we are, even if who we are isn't who we want to be. And in the process, we heal. So in the time of the faithful ache, when we don't know what to do, when hope is not in sight, stay curious, learn to accept, give up to the I don't know, and find the Khmer people. Next slide, Rabbi. Rabbi Heaps, thanks. Go back one. We're going too fast now. Yeah, next one. Thank you. And now we're up to the meat of the matter. Now we're at the meat part of the cholent. You know, when you're eating cholent and you're like, oh, there's lots of beans in this thing and lots of barley. Where's the meat, right? That's what I'm waiting for. Here's the meat in the cholent of our talk. When life hurts, let it. We learned this in the early days of the pandemic, HIV/AIDS, and it applies today to this pandemic. So here he says, my friend Dominic died in a car accident last year, survived living with AIDS for so many decades. And he came to the rooms one night and he said, so now I have AIDS, and I thought AIDS was going to make me bigger. I really did. I thought if I get a diagnosis like that, it'll make me into a bigger person. And what I've come to understand now that I've been given this diagnosis, that AIDS didn't make me bigger. What it did was it helped me see how big I've always been. Take that in for a second. Because this is about you. And last night, Rabbi Heap said to me, tomorrow when you're in the Torah study, just make sure you say something that applies to them. Because that's what they want to hear, right? Well, this applies to you. We don't need a bad thing to happen to us to make us bigger. It's just that when bad things happen to us, it shows us how big we've always been. We are enormous in our enoughness, in our goodness, in our essence, in our B'Tselem Elohim, that which represents God, that we express in the world. In the time of the faithful ache, we bow our head in the belly of darkness and search for a blessing. So I was teaching at a Jewish day school, Solomon Schechter in West Orange, New Jersey, many years ago, and a teenager on the aisle sneezed, 11th grade boy sneezed. And I said this line, when life hurts, let it. When life hurts, let it, because we live in a society of distress intolerance. We don't like to let our kids feel pain. No, don't feel pain. We'll get you, everything has to be good. And Betsy Stone, great educator, likes to say, what's the big deal? Why do parents want their kids to be happy so much? It's not even it's not even a possibility, right? I want my kid to be happy, but then it disappears. And my question is, according to whose definition of happiness? Their definition or your definition of happiness? Who defines what happy is? But when life hurts, let it means giving ourselves permission to be with the faithful ache. This is acceptance. This is allowance. This is the what now of life. Now this. So the teenager sneezed, and I said, when life hurts, let it. Oh, bless you. And because God is talking to us all the time, I don't know about you, but I hear it in my head all the time. Like this is current going through right now. And maybe it's me picking up on your energy, or maybe it's a prompt from an angel that's telling me what to say. I don't know. But something in my head said, say it again and put it together. So I did. I said it again and I put it together. And then this voice in my head said, but put it together real fast. So I said, okay, when life hurts, let it bless you. Oh, I see. When life hurts, let it bless you. There's a blessing in the pain. And you, are the one to decide what the blessing is. Nobody, not your therapist, not the rabbi, not your partner. They don't get to decide what the blessing is because it's your pain. You decide what the blessing is. And in some cases, the blessing might be as simple as, I am experiencing this thing that's happening to me so that I can understand somebody else who's in pain. Because as I said last night, as we said in our support group every Wednesday night, there's really only one of us here. There's only one of us here. And if I know that you know that I know that you know that I know that you know, into infinity, we're all going through it. And if I can make it a little easier for you by having been there, that's tikkun olam right there. That's a reason to get out of bed. That's purpose. The time of the faithful ache, bow our heads in the belly of darkness. Who bows their head? A person, an athlete on a podium getting a medal. They bow their head. Who bows their head? A king or a queen getting coronated. They bow their head. There's some sort of anointment that happens when you bow to the thing that seems to be so awful. I bow to this. I bow to this. And so anytime somebody tells me that in their life somebody died, my response is always, I bow my head. I'm bowing my head. I'm with you. Right? And so when life hurts, let it bless you. Next slide. In other words, a teenager, a BBG, B'nai B'rith organization, BBYO, wrote this letter to me a few years ago. And her name was Looking for Some Help to Unlock Me. And she writes in this note, it's okay to have pain. It's okay to hurt from pain. I make mistakes. I carry my mistakes with me in every cell of my body. In every cell of my body, I carry my mistakes. They don't define me, and this is the key. The mistakes don't define me. They don't make up who I am. They're there to actually help me access the entirety of me. That's what it means to let life hurt. Next slide. And finally, on this topic of letting life hurt, you know that nursery rhyme, row, row, row your boat? Well, there are 9 verses. And we're only taught the first verse. There's a reason that we don't teach the last verse, because we don't want our kids to feel distress. But the last verse is the most important verse, and it goes like this. Row, row, row your boat, watch the water flow. Rowing's fun, but rowing's hard. This is what I know. No, don't teach our kids that. Teach them the merrily part 4 times. But not that. Life is hard. I know that. Life is hard. I was teaching at Penn State a few years ago, and it was on a Zoom, and a student on the Zoom said, but is it okay, he actually said, is it okay to really be really upset? As if he needed permission to be upset, because he was being raised in a world, is being brought up in a world where we don't tolerate distress. We have to make it better, and you got to be happy. I just want you to be happy. And so he had to ask the speaker on a Zoom, is it okay to not be happy? Because we're not teaching them that that's a part of life too. Next slide. Last two. We're at the dessert part of it all. Keep your heart open. And it gets hard to do this. And this is important. This is an actual quote from the rooms. The goal is to take whatever shows up in your life and use it to be a more compassionate human being. So when you say, now this, when you say, here we all are, when we say all this is a part of all there is, then you say, what's the most loving thing I can do or say right now? Now, I'm interested to know where this question lands on you cerebrally, cognitively. When you read the question, what's the most loving thing I can do or say right now? Because your Khmer people, I think I'm in a room, safe to say, of many Khmer people, you're probably thinking, what's the most loving thing I can do or say right now to someone else? Because you're Khmer people. So now I want you to turn around. Keep your heart open doesn't just mean loving other people, being compassionate to other people. It's what's the most loving thing I can do or say right now to myself? How much more compassionate can I be to myself? And you hear the tears come in my voice when I say it, because now I'm being compassionate to me. Right? It starts with me. That is what it means to keep your heart open. It's not just love everybody. It's not a Coca-Cola commercial. I want to teach the world to love. It's not that. It's I want to love myself, even when it's hard. That's the point. So I'm speaking specifically now. Specifically, if I get a traffic ticket, a parking ticket, I stub my toe, something innocuously bad happens. I'm not talking about the big stuff, the innocuous stuff that you recover from. The first thing I do is say, how can I keep my heart open? How can I be more loving to myself and to others? Because that's why it's arrived, to be as loving as I can. Why? Stephen Levine, at that very same conference that I went to, where he said, pay attention, the secret to life, pay attention, he also said, AIDS and other diseases, that's not what's going to kill you. Everybody dies. What kills us is a closed heart. As long as our hearts are open, we're alive. So I'm going to say this 3 times for 3 reasons. I love you. I love you, and I love you. 1, because it's true. 2, because isn't it nice to hear the guest speaker say that? And 3, because when I love you, I'm more alive. It's a little selfish, self-serving on my end, but the more I love, the more I live. The more I love, the more my heart is open, and I'm alive. I'm living in the moment alive. So it's a selfish act to love, because I want to be here, present with you, with myself. It's a courageous act to love because it requires me to be present, and being present requires courage. Keep your heart open. Everything that happens is an opportunity to be compassionate. Now this. Here comes love. Coming at me, going at you. Last slide. John Fletcher Harris was a friend of mine who died of AIDS in the 90s, and I loved his name, so I say it often. John Fletcher Harris said this sentence to me. He was facilitating a group one night. I was sitting on the floor at his feet. I was watching him make up the words, and they seemed to just kind of leave his lips and dance around the room. Just imagine what a word looks like as it dances over your head. When a tree reaches up to drink in the sun, it doesn't ask if it is deserving. What a beautiful consideration. I mean, in science, it's simple photosynthesis. The tree takes the energy of the sun, it uses it to grow, gives off carbon dioxide, and then and the cycle of life. But what he's talking about metaphorically and poetically is that the tree never says, oh my God, I'm so fat, I couldn't possibly photosynthesize. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. I ate too much last night. I do not deserve the warmth of the sun. When a tree reaches up to drink in the sun, it takes what it needs. We must be like the tree. And so when you put them all together, surrendering to what we don't know so that God can be present, and then asking yourself what you do know, staying in the moment so that you can be present for God, and then being curious and adding in some acceptance and serving others and allowing life to hurt and finding the blessing and then saying, what are you going to do about it? And then sitting next to your Khmer person who helps you do all of this, you put it all together and you take what life gives you to grow and you drink in the sun. Final slide, I think, is one more. What does it mean to say you are completely loved because you are completely lovable? What does that mean? You are completely loved because you are completely lovable. It's a quote from Robert Levine, who also said, acceptance is such a beautiful word. Here's what it means to me. You're not just loved on Sunday mornings or good hair days or when the grandkids come over or if somebody asks for seconds for something you made for dinner. That feels like you're being loved. My friend Ruth says the only compliment I believe is when people ask for seconds of my food. Because they can tell me that my haircut's good, but they could be lying. They could say they like my sweater, but they could just be lying. But if they're going to eat more of my pasta, that's a compliment. They're telling the truth. You are completely loved because you are completely lovable all the time. Even in the dark times, the embarrassing times, the bloated times, the times of uncertainty. To walk the world knowing that there's something inside each and every one of us that can never be unloved or in teen speak unfriended. To walk the world knowing that there's something inside each and every one of you that can't be rejected or dismissed or denied because it's the part that God put there, the essence in you, the B'Tselem Elohim, the part that you reflect of God's image, your enoughness, your belonging here, your right to be here, is what makes you completely lovable. If you could just believe that every time you walk into a room, in walks that which is completely lovable, how different would your life be? There's a beautiful expression in Judaism, Rabbi, you probably could know where it comes from. Maybe the Talmud, most things do, right, from the Talmud, that when a person walks down the street, there's a host of angels that precedes that person, and the angels will say, make way, make way, make way. The image of God is coming through. What would it be like if you, really believed that? Walked into a room and said, the angels are they're making way, because here I am. In all my grief, in all my uncertainty, and with all my pain, and with all my mistakes, and with all my ego, and with all my contradictions, and with all my unmet desires, and with all my mess, here I am, completely lovable. Image of God, make way, because I am completely lovable. That is what we learn from a pandemic. The final thing I want to offer you, oops, I went over. Can I have one more slide? All right, last slide. So actually, let's block it for a second because I want to set it up if I can. So if you can go back, so I don't want. You can't read it anyways. Fine, that's good. All right, listen, this is really great. So I teach a class at Colby, it's a college in Maine. It's a January semester. It's an intensive, 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. And the assignment that I give them to finish the semester is, it's a class on AIDS. And they have to write a letter, my students, to a child who died of AIDS in the 80s or 90s. And I give them stories of literal, actual children who didn't survive. And they have to pick a child, and they have to write a letter to the child. And they have to tell the child about the life they missed. What would their life have been like? It's really a game to make them think about their own lives, to make them, it's a projection game. I will write to this child about my own wishes and dreams and read it back to myself and see what I want my life, what my life could be, what my life is. Or as I said last night in my drash, I'll look into the cup of rescue and realize that God has already filled it. Let me take a look and see what's in there. I already do have blessings. I'm so busy reaching for more blessings, I didn't realize I got some here. So the assignment is to write a letter, and you can do this too now to a child who died of, or a person who died of COVID. What did they miss? What are they missing now about their lives? To get your brain and your psyche to reflect on how great you got it. And here's what they wrote, a compilation of their final essays, a combination of many. They write, there it is, thanks. If you were still here, they write, this is what I would tell you. Fill your life with love and chocolate and friends and family and heartbreak. Fill your life with heartbreak. Who says that? No, we say, I want my kids to be happy. What would it be like to give the commandment, fill your life with heartbreak, because the world is both extremely terrifying and exquisitely beautiful. Enjoy the little things frequently and make the most of today and every day. Oh, and do me one favor, try not to be an asshole. Learn to love people early. Love people early. You decide. Is it early in the day? Is it early in the year? Is it early in your life? You decide. Early in the relationship? Love people early. Forgive people daily. And this one's big, you guys. This one's big. Forgive every day. Not just on Yom Kippur as the proverbial gates are closing in the Elah. No. We only do that to remind us to do it every day. Not just once a year. Forgive people daily because it adds life to your days. Forgive everyone everything. For 10 seconds of every day, close your eyes and forgive everyone everything. And on the 11th second, pick up the grudge again. But just feel what it feels like for 10 seconds of every day to just be in a total state of forgiveness. It will do wonders for you. And accept others fully. Learn to love people early, forgive people daily, and accept others fully. And write your own story. Just do the best you can. Because being human is complicated. And it's overwhelming, but that's what makes it so astounding. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa li nes v'nisim ha'arbei nisim b'makom hazeh. Thank you, God, creator of this universe, who grants me miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle in this very room. And for that, and together, we say, Amen.
And we have an opportunity tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock here at Temple for the next installment of Scott Fried. And this is for parents, for grandparents, for friends, for people in the community who have, in one way or another, teenagers in your life. And I think, Scott, you were talking about really 11-year-olds are considered teens. So it's not necessarily just having a teen as a part of the age, and what to do with that strange person in the back seat of your car. And so I hope that you'll come. Please invite others. All are welcome. It's open to the community. It'll be from 9 o'clock until 10:30 tomorrow morning, and then Scott is going to continue to do programming with our young people, with our 6th and 7th graders, and then our 8th, 9th, and 10th graders as well in the second part of the morning. So we wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. Thank you again, Scott, Rav Todot, and enjoy the rest of the day, and hopefully we'll see you back tomorrow.